Good morning and welcome to a Wednesday edition of Pod Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Got a good show for you today. We're going to kick it off with Cline up in Columbia, South Carolina. And then after the show, we're going to be joined by former Gator offensive lineman Jason Odom. But let's go ahead and head on over to the Titan MR hotline, and we're joined by Heath Cline. Good morning, Heath. How are you? Heath, you there?
Hey, Shane. Good morning.
Yes. How are you, my man? You doing okay?
Yeah, doing okay. Hopefully the internet doesn't mess with us today, but yeah, doing all right. I'm envious. So I'm looking, you got the video set up. You got the sweet deal with all the helmets or anything else. I can see your place. You're not seeing mine. There's no reason. I'm like in a closet here. You got the perfect office set up there, man. I'm envious.
Yeah, we had to sweeten things up a little bit when we went to the Zoom, but Heath, you can check Heath out on Twitter at Heath Radio. Also got his show going up in Columbia, South Carolina on 107.5 The Game from 4 to 7 on weekdays. Heath, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on. I know I saw a story where Coach Will Muschamp and a lot of the South Carolina players and coaching staff did a peaceful protest, a little march a few days ago. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just funny because it's certainly not something you would imagine on his own that Will Muschamp would have been super enthusiastic about getting involved in this kind of activity. But different times require you as a coach to lead your players in different ways. And so, Friday, as it turns out, they registered basically the entire team to vote. They went out as a part of a march that was going on in Columbia. March started down by the governor's mansion and then also marched down by the police department. And the good news was that players got a chance to express themselves and come together as a team, and it wasn't anything that led to issues. Columbia did have the weekend before that some people that took whatever good intentions there were in a protest and damaged those by getting physical, getting violent. And again, you can debate all you want about who's responsible for that, but certainly for the football team, a priority was making sure nothing like that happened, anything they were associated with. So they were able to express themselves, and it came off smoothly on that Friday. And they say they're going to continue to stay committed to this cause. That Muschamp back in I guess it would have been 2018. It was the week of the Florida game, and Muschamp actually got a lot of criticism nationally from people like Bucky Brooks, the NFL Network, for this idea that he didn't take it seriously enough, his players being involved. When he got asked at the press conference, hey, coach, it's election day, blah, blah, blah. And he pretended like he didn't know it was election day. Well, Muschamp's not an idiot. Of course he knew it was election day, but he kind of goofed around about, I didn't even know that. And he got a bunch of criticism for it. So to see him go from that, just joking about 2018 to out there with a face mask on marching, these are different times we're living in, Shane. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's crazy times, no question. Heath, when you obviously, I guess it was Monday, a lot of the SEC student athlete football players reported to their campuses. I think 87 have been here at the University of Florida. 80 have been tested. The other 7 players, their tests are pending, but nobody has tested positive for COVID-19 here with the Gators. Have you heard anything of what's going on up in Columbia with the Gamecocks?
Yeah, curiously enough, they're not announcing anything. I don't quite understand what's different about their circumstances than anybody else, because I know Florida announced nobody had tested positive, and then like Auburn said, we have this number, Alabama had said this number. Most schools seem to be announcing something, but for privacy reasons, South Carolina has refused so far to identify anybody. Muschamp went through if someone tested positive, this is what we would do, but they have actually refused to acknowledge that yet. And I mean, you tend to think, based on what we've seen at almost every school but Florida, the odds are pretty good they've had somebody test positive or will soon enough. But right now, we have no hard info on that, and they're not sharing it for whatever reason.
So right now, from the people that you've talked to, Heath, and we're speaking with Heath Cline on the Titan MR hotline, do you think the football season is going to start on time this year?
Will Muschamp says that he's very confident it will. Now, I don't know how anybody can say definitively anything when we talk about what's happening with a health crisis, but they seem to feel like, at least right now, things are at a point, and they've reopened about everything in South Carolina, except for just saying, hey, it's full go for restaurants to just do whatever you want. But most things have opened up. But also the numbers have surged a little bit recently. So will they have to dial things back a little bit? I think, though, the bigger question that whether we're going to have football is probably, are we going to have fans with football? And right now, I think the answer is probably yes. But that's where you wonder if the numbers start to change, maybe they back down a little bit on how many people, or if they have people in the stands. But the kids themselves actually playing football, if that doesn't happen in September, at this point, I'd be really surprised.
Yeah. When you speak of the fans, in the Southeastern Conference, the slogan is "It just means more," and we all know the passion of the fan bases, regardless of what school you root for. If you think if they just said, how many fans do you think would just show up if everything just said, hey, we're going to start on time. If you have a season ticket or you have a ticket, you're welcome to come, wear a mask, whatever you want to do. How many people do you think would show up in the SEC from a fan base standpoint?
Well, I think some of it depends on if you just did completely just say, hey, we don't care, we're putting no restrictions, you break it, you buy it with regards to your personal health, but not our problem. You can't sue us, take your chances. I think if it was a quality game at a time people were interested in going to, yeah, you get more than half the people in there no matter what. Now, I do think that there's some people, older fans in particular, that either they themselves would take it more seriously, or maybe their kids would say, look, Dad, it's great you love the Gators and want to be at the game, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to have you potentially exposing yourself to this virus just so you can make sure you don't miss a football game you can watch on TV. So you don't know exactly how many people would have somebody in their life that might do it, but sure, there's a portion of the fan base, no matter where you go, that would just say, hey, this thing, I'm not scared of it, I bring it on. What I'm curious about is what kind of balances people are going to strike, Shane. So let's say that they say to fans, okay, we can get 20,000 people in here if we don't have any restrictions other than you got to stay in your seat. You can't all try to move to the 50-yard line 5 minutes after kickoff. You got to stay where you are, but you can come in. Or we can put 35,000 people in here, but you got to wear a mask. And if you take your mask off, we're going to have to ask you to leave. Like, you got to wear the mask. You can't just wear it through the turnstile and then throw it in your pocket. Yeah, how many? That's where I wonder is where the balance gets struck. If people start to get the least bit inconvenienced, how they're going to handle that.
Yeah, I just how hot it gets in the swamp for those.
Oh yeah,
3:30 games, especially on the east side. I can't imagine wearing a mask. People already have heat strokes over there. Can you imagine having a mask on? Oh, it'd be tough. Heath, let's talk a little bit of football. I want to say South Carolina, they had a few days of spring practice, if I'm not mistaken. Mike Bobo, the new offensive coordinator for Will Muschamp. Do you like that hire? Do you think it will help his offense?
Yeah, they got 5 in, and I think that's really important because they do have a new coordinator. And Shane, it's the first time that Will Muschamp has ever had a guy running his offense that has coordinated an SEC offense for any length of time and had success. And you could argue, there were Georgia fans who were convinced that they could do better than Bobo when he was out, and that's all fine and good. But Bobo knows this conference and was not somebody who couldn't call plays in the conference when he was here. Again, you can criticize and say, oh, you run the ball more. Where he understands, though, the rhythm of play calling, the kind of athletes and defenses you see in this conference. And that's just not something that Muschamp has had before. He's had guys trying to learn the role. He's had guys coming in for places like Boise. This time it has to work. And having a guy in Mike Bobo with that experience in the conference is really important. And the fact he was able to bring a couple of guys with him. He brought his quarterback, Colin Hill, who didn't get to play much last year because of injury, but he brings a quarterback with him who knows the system and can, at minimum, help other guys understand it. He also brought his fullback with him because Gamecocks really haven't done anything with fullback recently. That I think is really important to help him out. But here's one thing that jumped out at me, Shane. Empty backfield last year. The team that ran the most plays in America empty backfield last year was LSU. The number 2 team in America for empty backfield plays with a true freshman quarterback starting 11 games was the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Really? I did not realize that.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, does that make any sense to you at all? I mean, when you look at how their offense was struggling, it's one thing if Joe Burrow's doing that, but if you see your quarterback flailing, does that make any sense to you at all that they were still doing that much empty down the stretch?
No, and with your head coach not preferring going empty, you know what I'm saying? That's not his MO. And that really surprises me. I had no idea. That's a tremendous stat that you just threw at us. So, speaking of Bobo, do you think it's Helinski's team, or does his transfer quarterback that played a little bit for him at Colorado State get an opportunity?
I think it'd be really hard for them to not have Helinski be the guy at the start of the season, unless in camp he's just not ready at all, and one guy just blows him away. I think it'd be hard for Bobo to just come in and say, "Yeah, my guy is going to take over the show. Step aside." But I do think that whereas last year it was pretty clear it was going to need to be Helinski's team, if he is struggling, I think Colin Hill will get a shot and get a shot pretty quickly because we don't know the math of it now, Shane. I mean, everything is going to depend this year on what the revenues turn out to be as to what these athletic budgets could be. But before this crisis, the money was not there last year to buy out Will Muschamp. This year, with a full year to prepare for the idea of a buyout, because they never thought going into last year a buyout was the thing they were going to need to talk about. But this year, the money would have been there for a buyout if this team is not at minimum in a bowl game. So if you're a Muschamp, you may have a little longer leash because it might be harder to come up with $13 million now, but you've got to get off to a good start. If you look at their schedule, November is death. So you have to get off to a good start in September or you're screwed. And so they're just not going to be able to say, let's give Helinski a couple of weeks to figure things out. If he's not performing and they think Colin Hill can solve the problem, Hill's going to have to solve the problem.
We got a comment here on Facebook Live brought to you by Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorneys. Hunter says, I know Mississippi State has not returned yet, and I'm assuming Ole Miss is the same. So maybe the Mississippi schools haven't returned. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in Tennessee. I don't know with your talk show radio if you have a bunch of Vol fans, but it seems like they think they're going to contend for the national title the way that they have recruited virtually here in the last couple of months. Obviously, a lot of these commits could change here in the next couple of months, but are you surprised at what's going on with Tennessee from a recruiting standpoint?
I'm a little surprised by it, but the other part of it too, Shane, is that you talk to some people who cover recruiting and they feel like for whatever reason, Tennessee has really pushed this idea of getting early commitments and really tried to emphasize that they want to get that momentum going and that maybe some of these commitments aren't necessarily guys that either they are going to actually take when the time comes, that if Tennessee's having success, that they may push some of these kids out of the boat to get some more in down the line, or also that some of these kids are kind of making reservations. Bud Elliott's a guy that does some really interesting work for 24/7 Sports on recruiting, and he's been pointing out the number of players committed right now compared to this exact same time last year across the whole country is almost double. And I mean, think about it. These kids haven't had anything to do. They've been home. They've been bored. Sure, why not commit? But then when you're talking about kids committing in some cases who never actually physically met the coaches that they've committed to, who haven't been to the campus to meet their teammates that they're committing to, we're going to probably have a whole bunch of disruption in the fall compared to what we normally have with regards to decommitments. I think Tennessee, just as a program that's been more aggressive than most, is probably going to also have more decommitments than most. That doesn't mean they can't have a really good class, but I just getting caught up in the idea of a lot of early commitments this year probably at the end is not going to reflect what these classes look like for Tennessee or a lot of other schools.
When you look at the SEC East, a lot of people think it's going to come down to the game in Jacksonville between Florida and Georgia. When you look at Georgia, they lost a ton of players. They lost Jake Fromm. They lost their coordinator. They bring in a new offensive coordinator. They get Jamie Newman, transfer quarterback from Wake Forest, which he's getting a lot of love. I'm not buying it right now. But they also just got a transfer from USC, JT Daniels. I'm not sure the status, if he's going to be eligible to play this year or not. But were you surprised that they went and got or pursued JT Daniels?
Yeah, it's funny you were talking about Tennessee, Shane, because there's a lot of people that think maybe the reason they did that is to keep him from being at Tennessee. Not that he can't play for them too, but because they already have their quarterback lined up this year, if he doesn't win his battle to try and get that waiver approved, it's not that big a deal to Georgia. But he would have been a perfect fit for Tennessee to have same kind of deal. They weren't, the story on Garantano. I mean, yes, he got him through last year, but there's reasons why Tennessee might not still be sold that Garantano is the best possible option they could have. So he could have pushed Garantano this year, been perfectly positioned to be the quarterback for Tennessee for the next year or two after that. So if you're Georgia, you not only have him for yourself, but you also keep him away from Tennessee. I mean, they got a kid, that Brock Vandegrift kid, that's supposed to be the next great quarterback. And so Daniels might not ever even be the main guy for Georgia, but he won't be the main guy for Tennessee. And that might be more important.
Gotcha. When you look at the Gators, Heath, I've looked at their schedule a bunch, and with the returning players that they have, the schedule, Kyle Trask, having a returning quarterback, with the way teams didn't really have spring ball, Dan Mullen has his system in place. I really think they can be in the hunt for the 14th playoff this year. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like this would be the year if it's going to happen. The one thing is, Shane, I don't know. I feel like there's still a little bit of a talent gap there that I'm not sure they've quite made up yet. I mean, Mullen's a great coordinator, and we know that we've seen that Trask made a lot of steps last year. So you feel like, boy, with an off season to be the guy that he can make another jump. I just don't know if I see the kind of team top to bottom on both sides of the ball and the line that I think is a top 4 playoff level team. And whenever we base anything on schedule, especially if it's that a team will do well based on schedule, that's where I get a little reluctant sometimes. I feel like people picking Florida to pass Georgia, I think that's part of it. Georgia might be more vulnerable this year. That's true. But the reality is, Shane, a Mullen coached offense hasn't scored more than 20 on a Kirby Smart led defense since Tebow in 2008. No matter where he's been and where Kirby's been, he hasn't broken 20, and frequently he hasn't even broken 10 on Kirby Smart defenses. We got to see him show that he can win that matchup. That's if they beat Georgia, that's the day I buy in that they're ready to go top 4. You could win the East. I'm not saying they can't, but to be playoff level, you got to win that game.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. So right now, if we were at SEC Media Days and you had to put in your vote, who's going to be playing in Atlanta, who's Heath Cline putting in there from the West and the East?
At this point, knowing only what we know, I go Florida because I'm with you. Jamie Newman, there's some things to like about Jamie Newman, but I think that there are some people who are making assumptions about how he will fit in at Georgia and that things will be a little more seamless than maybe they are. So I'd go Florida right now. And I think Alabama has to be considered the more likely team than LSU. When you lose the amount of personnel LSU lost, plus Burrow was just such a transcendent player. Even if you had Joe Brady there to run the offense, I'm sure that would help. But Burrow was just extraordinary. That dude was the deodorant that covered up any stink that developed anywhere. I just don't see how you lose a guy like that and not suffer a pretty significant loss. So, LSU is going to be loaded with talent like they always are. But it feels like this year Alabama is probably better suited to win that division. So, Alabama, Florida is not going to excite anybody. But if we were putting in a vote today, that's what I'd be going with.
Heath, we had some really bad news from the Gator Nation over the weekend with Rishae Caldwell shot and killed down in the Tampa area. I want to say you were in the Gainesville area covering sports and the Gators when he was playing, and he was part of those really good offenses with Rex Grossman at quarterback, had Rishae, Jabbar Gaffney, and Taylor Jacobs. Do you have any thoughts? Do you remember what kind of player, where would you rank Rishae with all the great receivers that we had here at Florida?
He was. I hated seeing that so much, Shane. And obviously, we all knew that Rishae had some issues since his pro days. Had a couple of brushes with the law, but that doesn't mean you ever think it's going to end up like that. You hope when a guy has a couple of problems that things get straightened out. And so, the one thing that I thought stood out was everybody who was saying versions of, oh man, he always had a great smile. He was always a fun guy. Because that was his thing. He was a guy that just you could joke around with and who once in a while would line up. Or I remember Spurrier got upset with him one time about lining up wrong and costing him a touchdown. And he said, we go over this over and over, and he just lines up wrong. I just remember talking to Rishae about it, and he kind of he just kind of made a face and rolled his eyes a little bit, but it wasn't a rolling his eyes like, I can't believe Coach said it. It was like, yeah, you know me, type of thing. But you couldn't be mad at him because he was just this really nice, kind of fun guy, and it was a terrific player. I mean, again, that I saw that debate between the guys that were part of that era in the mid '90s there versus that group at the end with Gaffney and Jacobs and Caldwell, and I still think you have to lean towards Ike and Riddell and that grouping. I think you got to lean that way. But the fact it's even a conversation tells you how impressive that late group with Grossman was. And so, yeah, Caldwell, from my hometown of Tampa too. And so seeing that happen, he originally, when we first found out about him, he was Donald Caldwell. He wasn't even Richey. He was Donald Caldwell, and he was this quarterback prospect. And then, suddenly one practice in, he's Richey, and he's also a guy who's going to be a receiver. And really quickly, it became clear he was going to make a real impact. So seeing that happen the way that it did, seeing the part of Tampa he was in, I guess I just would have never thought after a more than a half decade NFL career that he'd be in that part of town, period, living there, much less that it would turn out this way. And yeah, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. A guy who was a really, really good dude to cover back in the day. And I know he and his teammates had a good close bond, so they got to feel awful for him.
Yeah, well, Heath, we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Let everybody know how they can listen to you up in Columbia, South Carolina.
We're on 107.5 The Game. I do 4 to 7 every afternoon, and we're on TuneIn, I believe. So you can look us up there or go to the website, 107.5thegame.com. Easiest way is just do any one of those, or you can always find me on Heath Radio. We put out podcasts sometimes of people who appear on the show and so forth. So you can catch some podcasts just on my Twitter at Heath Radio.
Good stuff, my man. Stay safe up there, and we'll talk to you soon, Heath.
Sounds good, Shane. Be well, man.
Appreciate it. That's Heath Cline. Join us on the Titan MR hotline. At Center State Bank, we put business first. We are the largest community bank in the state of Florida and understand that small businesses need a community business partner that they can rely on. Center State has 5 convenient Alachua County locations to serve you better. To learn more, visit centerstatebank.com. Center State Bank, member FDIC. We're going to take a first time out of the program. We come back. We're going to be joined by former Gator great offensive lineman, number 74, Jason Odom. You're watching and listening to Pod Up with Matthews in the morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be right back.
Time out! Time out! Hey! Time out! Time out! Time out! There we go. Good.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.
Let's give them something to cheer for now.
Our gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. The Best Restoration, Masters of Disasters. Pound Hurt, your preferred personal injury attorneys. Peachland Dental, Gator fans' first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Celebration Point Town Center, The Digital Mortgage Guy, Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Center State Bank, Gator Bait Media, Davis Gainesville Chevrolet, Miapa Latin Cafe, Gators Dockside, Okido America Martial Arts and After School,
Doreen Weeby Realtor, Caldwell Banker MM Parish,
Radware, Wrap Spot,
and Style Cuts.
If you are interested in promoting your business on this show, you can visit our website, podupwithshane.com, and click on the advertise button or call Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you for all the great businesses that support the show. Please remember, if you like what we are doing here, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
He's looking, still looking. He's going for the end zone. He's got a touchdown!
Welcome back to a Wednesday edition of Pod Up with Matthews in the morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Hey, folks, Celebration Point is where the Gators come to celebrate with premium brands like Bass Pro Shop, Palmetto Moon, Skechers, Starbucks, the Keys Grill and Piano Bar, Select Shades, Regal Cinemas, and coming soon, the HBC's new restaurant, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, and Visor's Rooftop Bar. We will see you at Celebration Point, where the Gators come to celebrate. We want to thank Heath Cline for joining us. Don't forget tomorrow's program, we got former Gator quarterback Wayne Peace on the show with Brent Beard as well. Now let's go back to the Titan MRO hotline, and we're joined by UF Hall of Famer, Big Jason Odom. Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Good morning, man. This would have been a better morning if it was like at 10 or something. It's a little early for me.
Well, sorry we had to get you out of bed, my man. I know you got a rough life going there right now. But Jason, we appreciate you taking the time to join us. I like when I bring all the former players on here, I like to go back to their early days of high school. You came out of Bartow High School. Did you play any other sports other than football growing up?
Yeah, Shane. I played everything. I played basketball. I played baseball. I actually only played, I think, 1 year of basketball because it coincided with wrestling, and I also wrestled. And so, I tried to do it all. Made coaches mad made my wrestling coach mad when I wanted to play basketball, and vice versa. And threw the shot and disc and track. I think that was about it. Baseball, basketball, shot, disc, obviously football. In fact, when I was being recruited by Florida, Jim Collins and Coach Spurrier came down and watched me take ground balls for third base.
How big were you at third base?
I was a mountain over there, but man, I could feel the ground ball and throw it across the diamond. So.
That's good stuff. So I assume let's talk about your recruiting process. I guess Jim Collins was responsible for your area.
Yeah.
What other schools did you take visits to, or possibly were deciding to go play for?
Shane, probably unlike you, I grew up a Gator from the time I knew what football was like or what it was. But I tried to be diplomatic through that whole process, and I ended up being, back then they didn't have all the recruiting services now. There was no stars or whatever. But I got pretty much the pick of the litter. I got to, choose just about anywhere. And back then, Michigan was spitting out linemen left and right in the NFL. And I guess probably that was the maybe the closest thing to Florida that I wanted to go. So I went on my first official visit. I think it was in December of the fall of that year in '91. And I hated the whole process. I couldn't stand the visit. I didn't like how much time, they spent putting pressure on you. And so I came home from that visit, and I canceled the rest of my visits and didn't even take them, and just committed to Florida. I think I was, obviously it wouldn't apply now because they commit when they're like 8th grade, I think. But I think I was the first commitment of that '92 class because it was in December. And I never looked back because I said, who am I fooling? I was a Gator growing up. I want to play there. I don't want to do all these visits, So really to me, it didn't even matter who the rest of my visits were. It could have been, whoever. But I took one visit to Michigan and canceled the rest.
Gotcha. Well, at '92 was my senior year. You come in as a true freshman. And a lot of people a lot of really Gator Nation knows that you and Reggie Green both played as true freshmen at left and right tackle, which back in those days, true freshmen hardly played, but definitely offensive linemen didn't play in the SEC. Talk a little bit of what it was like playing right out of high school back in 1992.
Yeah. So, as I get older, the more I appreciate that, Shane, and the more I realize what in the world you may have been thinking with two freshman tackles in front of you and how that may have affected your game. Because while Reggie started from day one at left tackle, a guy named Ryan Taylor, they were trying to give him a chance to have the spot at right tackle. So on day one, I wasn't the starter, but as you well know, the first 3 games didn't go very well. And I remember when I think it was up in Tennessee when we were getting shellacked in the rain. Rich McGeorge was our O-line coach, and they'd already pulled the starters out. And of course, I didn't start that game. So I didn't want to go in as a reserve at the end of the game, and I was at the other end of the sidelines hiding because he was putting reserves in the game. I'm like, man, I don't want to go in this massacre. But I think the next week was the next week Mississippi State.
Yes.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and we kind of got manhandled up front. And I don't have to tell you, you remember, but after that game is when they made the change with me, and so I started from LSU on, and I don't think I knew how big a deal it was back then, just being a couple months out of high school, and we were able to get better. Thank goodness we were able to get better, and certainly you got some trust in us as we got better and finished off at a good year that year. But I'm thankful. I tell people that the farther away I get from the game, the more I realize that I wasn't all that good. I was there at the right time.
Well, I don't know about that. I just, it is like you said, the farther you get away from the game, the older we get. It's really amazing because true freshmen did not play back in our day. It was pretty much you sign a scholarship, you're going to be redshirted, get bigger, stronger, faster in the weight room, put some weight on. But man, we threw y'all right into the fire right away. And then, and in that 92 season, we like you said, we got better and somehow made it to the first ever SEC championship game. And now we're matched up with maybe one of the best college defenses of all time. You got Curry and Copeland, tremendous pass rushers going against the freshmen. Talk a little bit about that game.
So that was interesting. I don't know if it. I want to remember it as them being statistically the best. I mean, I don't think a whole lot of people were scoring very many points on them the whole year, and those two up front were certainly some of the biggest reasons why. And just as a side note, I ended up being teammates with Eric Curry in Tampa, and love that dude. He was crazy, but anyways, when we knew, that's all I heard for however long, 2 weeks it was, or 3 weeks, between the last game and the SEC championship game, about how good those guys were and how these freshmen aren't going to be able to block them, and so I played mostly in that game against. I didn't play much against Curry. He was on the other side where Reggie was. I played against
Copeland.
John Copeland, and they had an outside linebacker, Antonio. It wasn't Langham. He was the guy that intercepted. It was London, maybe.
Yep, that's exactly what it was.
And so those two are the guys I was blocking, and obvious passing down. So it was end up being the outside linebacker, but. I think we held our own. There was a point in that game where I thought there was no chance they were going to win. I thought we had it, and I felt like their defense couldn't score on us, and we were. I don't know if you remember this, Shane, but there was a point where we had a TV timeout, and that game was so cold. we stood there for it seemed like 5 minutes and just killed the momentum we had. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. Yeah, it was a very cold game, no doubt about it.
And so maybe that's an excuse. I don't know, but I just felt like we had that game sewn up, and gosh, I hated it.
Yeah, we did. We were down 21-7, and then when we tied it up 21-all, you could hear a pin drop, and we had an opportunity. Yeah. But somebody made a bad decision. We won't talk about that. So Jason, your class of '92, a lot of good players signed. Obviously. Who I think is the greatest quarterback to ever play here, Danny Werfel, was in that class, and I was Danny's host on his visits and stuff. But you were his roommate here. Talk a little bit about yours and Danny's relationship during your college days.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember this. The first time I met you was host weekend when Danny was with you. I think we did something with y'all, but that was really the first time that he and I met was on the recruiting visits to Gainesville, and we just hit it off. We both were, faith was important to us, and I guess in the recruiting visit, he mentions to Spurrier that if he comes to Florida, because he wasn't committed yet, and right. I was. He mentioned to Spurrier that if he comes to Florida, that he and I wanted to be roommates, which was the truth. We both had talked about it, but I still didn't know if he was coming to Florida, and so leaving the official visit, I get home and Spurrier's already left a message on my voicemail giving me Danny's home phone number. Of course, nobody had cell phones back then. But we'd already exchanged numbers, and I was already going to call him anyways. But Spurrier's message was, received very well, that I needed to start helping get Danny into, to commit to Florida. And as everybody knows, it's water under the bridge. He commits and comes to Florida. And I still remember it. Jan Hall, room 229, was our first room, and it was really just the beginning of a tremendously great friendship. And I still cherish our times. We didn't live together all 4 years. We were in Jan Hall in 2 different rooms, and then we moved to Flavette, which ironically I guess is now called the Keys Building. So I didn't realize that until last week.
Right.
And then I think my last year I moved into an apartment, but I still talk to Danny, as you well know. We Zoom called a few days ago or last week or something on his birthday, and just love him and his family. It's been a tremendous amount in my life, and certainly I would agree with you. One of the best ever put on the orange or blue to throw it.
We're speaking with Jason Odom on the Titan MR hotline from the Crime Prevention Security Systems Studios. You can follow Jason on Twitter at Odom74_70. Back to your college days, you won the Jacobs Trophy, which is a great honor. Talk a little bit about what that meant to you.
That was cool, Shane. I mean, I think starting those early days at Florida, I ended up being on the field for so long that, I got some of those accolades. And really, again, and I'm not trying to be fake humble here, but I think that those trophies end up going to, decent players, but that are on great teams.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we had. I mean, we just had, our offense was tremendous as we moved forward the next 3 years after you were left, and we just ended up having a really good run. And I was fortunate enough to win the Jacobs Trophy twice, actually. One of my junior and senior year. The funny thing about the Jacobs Trophy, Shane, I don't know if you know this, is that I didn't actually receive a trophy.
Really?
It's a plaque. There's no trophy.
That makes no sense. They should have some big offensive lineman mauling somebody.
Right. And maybe they've changed that now and they haven't, but they didn't actually have the trophy. I thought that was pretty funny that I win the Jacobs Trophy, but there's a plaque. There's no trophy.
We got a Facebook Live question here, and I'm curious because I can't remember. It's brought to you by Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorney. Jeff wants to know, what was your size at Florida?
So I came in from high school, and I was listed at 6'6", 283, I think is what it was, and my weight was probably right. My height was probably inflated a little bit. I think I was probably legitimately, 6'5", and the weight was right on. As you remember, Shane, Spurrier didn't like, overly fat linemen, so he would walk by you every day and say, "What you weighing?" And it was always, whatever my weight was, it was always under 300 because I didn't want to sit the fat man's table. And so my whole career, I don't think I was ever over 300 at Florida. I think I came in at about 283, and I stayed probably up to about 295 when I left.
Talk a little bit about, I've had other offensive linemen on here, and there's a unique bond among the offensive linemen. You guys don't get a whole lot of love. You do all the dirty work. Just talk about some of the linemen you played with here at Florida, and do you stay in touch with those guys?
Yeah, I do. I love those guys, and you're right. There's a bond that won't ever be broken until we're 6 feet under, and it probably starts with my freshman class. But the veteran that I really grew to love once I got there was a guy named Jim Watson. I really enjoyed Big Watt. Everybody knew Big Watt. And I actually still see Jim. Not a lot of guys reach out to him, but I reach out to Jim, and we go and have lunch and tell stories. And he's in the Trinity area in Florida, and that's only 30, 40 minutes from me. And so I hang out with Watt on occasion. The rest of my freshman class, just about Jeff Mitchell and Donnie Young, those guys were in my weddings. I don't get to talk to them as much, but or I guess see them as much. I still try to talk to those guys. Talked to Donnie for an hour last week. People will remember Donnie Young, on that 96 team. Well, most of my freshman class on that 96 national championship team, just not me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's Coach Spurrier's fault for playing you in '92. Let's talk about your last game as a Gator, playing for the national title against Nebraska. Do you still have, I don't want to say nightmares, does that still bother you?
Yeah, you could say nightmares, Shane. That's exactly what they are. It's it seems like I have a conversation about that game. At least once a month, maybe even more frequent than that. But I just so dejected that that's the way it ended, because that 95 team was so good, and not many games that we had played that whole year were even close. I mean, we were beating teams ridiculously bad, even good teams. And it was just a perfect storm of a bunch of different things. It was the first time I'd ever seen in any Gator team I was on where we were bickering with each other and at halftime. I think the expectations were that we were just going to roll heads when we went out there, and we found ourselves in a dogfight and just didn't respond the right way. But gosh, I mean, even me, that was the first and only time that I ever kind of had words with Coach. I mean, on the sidelines, he was, Spurrier was talking about a specific blitz that we weren't picking up, and I was arguing my point, which when I was able to go back and watch the film, guess who was wrong, Shane? Me. It was me. I'm the one that screwed up with the look we were getting, and I'd just been around so much at that point. I thought I was right. I thought I saw it the way it was happening, and once I was go back and watch the film, I was like, man, that was me. I could have helped us out better, but I don't think that that my screw ups would have helped us, tackle Tommy Frazier any better, or who was your running back, Lawrence Phillips. Yeah, so it's really dejecting, and I think about it all the time, and it's actually not the last time I put on the Gator helmet, though. That's why I played in an All-Star game, so I try to remember that more than I do that last team game.
Right. So you get drafted by the Tampa Bay Bucks, which actually had to be kind of a dream come true. I would assume the Bucks were your team growing up. You played there for a few years. Obviously, you had a bunch of injuries that kind of cut your career short. Talk a little bit about what it was like to play for the Bucks.
So yeah, I mean, I'm obviously, you said Bartow, the Polk County product, and the Bucks are the next county over. People ask me pre-draft, where do you want to go? Because you would think I was a Bucks fan, but I was actually a Dolphins fan growing up, because the Bucks were terrible when I was a kid, and so I grew up, watching the Dolphins and rooting for them. But the one thing I said pre-draft was that, is if I don't get a choice, but if I could choose, it'd be close to home. And so I kept saying that, and sure enough, it wasn't the draft position that I had anticipated. Everybody from my agent and everybody else that I'd talked to had said late first round, second round probably draft pick, and I sat there until actually day 2. I was the first pick of the 4th round, and but you know what? It was all in God's plan, and led me to he led me to Tampa, and where my family got to watch me play really close, and end up raising my kids here, and played for one of the best coaches that I've ever been around, one of the best human beings I've ever been around, Tony Dungy. I mean, just meant a lot to me to watch how a man like that can operate and live his life in a fishbowl, and do it with grace and honor and style, and just a tremendous time. So I'm very thankful for that. And obviously, you mentioned the injuries. Yeah, my back was a problem for me at Florida. I didn't miss any games there, missed some practices. But when I came to Tampa, it seemed like once a year I dealt with my back getting bad, and I was still able to get through it. But my 4th year, it got so bad that I couldn't recover and ended up having surgery. And I think the problem at that point is they took out so much disc material. I started having problems with how much my vertebrae moved, and started impacting my spinal cord whenever I did anything dynamic. And so I had to retire due to my back. And after my 5th year. So hard road, but I knew God had a plan, and I just following it.
Yep. And after that, you became a sheriff, and we have a Facebook Live question here from Rick, brought to you by Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorneys. Rick wants to know, is Jason still with the HCSO?
No, the short answer is no, I'm not. But not because I didn't love it. It was because my back got so bad it was hard for me to sit at a desk, because I'd already moved off the streets, and I was in the community outreach division, and really had a great job teaching young people that had an interest in law enforcement, called the Explorers Program, and I loved that. But my back got so bad that that it was difficult for me to sit in an office for any length of time. Just sitting up was tough. So I actually went on short-term disability with the sheriff's office in 2014, and then went out on total and permanent disability in 2015. So it's been a good minute since I've actually worked there, but still a lot of close friends there, and keep in touch with those guys as well. From one team to the next.
No doubt. We're speaking with Jason Odom. A few more minutes left with Jason. Jason, your family, you married Linda. I want to say Linda was a basketball player here for the Lady Gator basketball team. You have 3 kids, one that played college volleyball, and obviously Jonathan is a UF signee as a tight end. Talk a little bit about how excited y'all must be for him to be able to run out of that tunnel in a Gator uniform.
Oh, it's so fun, Shane. I'm sure as the feelings that you have with your son. I mean, it's a dream come true for us, but we were really careful on how much we interjected in his decision, because I wanted him to own whatever decision he made, and he ended up being kind of a highly sought after recruit. I think he ended up, when it was all said and done, with I think 36 Division I offers or something, and the only thing I tried to speak to is not let that crap get to his head, because that offers don't make you a better football player.
Right.
At all. And so I think he did okay with all that, and really the whole decision was kind of a surprise to his mom and I. And yes, you were right. Linda was a Lady Gator basketballer, and we met at the Rights Union at Florida. So it's a special place for us. And for Jonathan to choose there was just, it was actually like May of last year, we were going up to a barbecue up there that they were having some recruits up to. And he looked at us and said, "Hey, low key, I think I'm going to commit today." And we were both just, our jaws dropped, because he had never even alluded that Florida was, 1 or 2. It was always top 5. Even when we have private conversations, it's like, all right, if you had to choose right now who it would be, and he would choose some other school, up until that day. And I said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Don't play with me now." Because I said, "I can handle this." He goes, "No, I'm serious." And so we didn't push at all, Shane. We tried to let him make his decision, but when he made it, we were ecstatic. And he hasn't looked back. He hasn't regretted it 1 minute. And so, I mean, we've got pictures with him running on Florida Field when he was 4 years old, back in the day. So I think deep down that's where he wanted to go. And it's working out for him. Like you mentioned, our older daughter she's got her senior year in volleyball. She plays at a Division II school called Lynn University.
Mm-hmm.
She's a middle, and she's got a chance to, even if she plays only a handful of games, she looks like she's going to break the school's all-time blocking record.
Wow.
So it's exciting to watch her. And then our third child's our young Lydia. She's 15, but I appreciate you asking about them, man.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff. We got a text here on the Titan Number text line. I was going to ask you this, but Daryl wants to know, Jason, what is your funniest Coach Spurrier story?
My funniest is probably not fit for radio, but there's a lot of them. I mean, gosh.
Or do you have one that you can tell us on air?
Yeah, I guess my first funniest memory is, we used to do that Oklahoma drill to start, every camp.
Mm-hmm.
And my freshman year, your senior year, there was a team brawl. I mean, everybody went after each other. And I think it started between, was it Carlton Miles, and then one of our old linemen started it. So it ended up being offense versus defense. Well, I was kind of wide-eyed being a freshman. I've been on campus all of about a month. And they started a brawl, and Spurrier went in the middle of the brawl, and, and he got tossed back out. And I just remember it was like seeing a cartoon, him going in there and then getting thrown right back out of the pile. Because I had enough sense. I'm like, I'm not getting in the middle of that. I don't know which side to take.
No doubt.
Yeah. But
yeah, he's a piece of work. There's nobody like him.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share one other story with him. So, this was after we got done playing. We went to his office. Danny and I went up there, and I was done. I think Danny had just finished his senior year, and we were coming into town, or at least I was, to spend some time with him and Chris Doring, and we walked into Spurrier's office, and he looked at us like, where y'all going to eat? And Danny's like, well, we're going to Napolitano's or somewhere. And it looked like he was about to invite himself. And I was looking at Danny going, what are you going to do? And Danny just he didn't know what to do, because it looked like Coach wanted to go with us. And this was kind of just a players deal. We were getting together. And he goes, well, I can't join y'all today. I got stuff to do, but maybe next time. And so I said, all right, that sounds good, Coach. But I mean, for his quirkiness, I mean, we all love him, and so thankful that we got to play for him. At least I am.
We had somebody, I want to say maybe it was Deke's story, or somebody said that it was like an inside run period or team period a couple of days ago when y'all were playing, and Coach came into the huddle, was getting ready to call the play, but Deke said you stunk the huddle up so bad that Coach Spurrier canceled the drill and said, just go to special teams. You remember that?
Well, yeah, that was the story I wasn't going to share.
Deke threw you threw you under the bus. He said, he mentioned it last week.
Yeah, he'd always come in the huddle. It's almost like he was the quarterback still. He would come in the huddle. I know you can't see me, but I'm doing the move where he puts his hands on your shoulder pads, and he'd call the play, and I had a little bad stomach, and and gave a stench, and he came in, and nobody moved. All the offensive huddle just stood there, and he came in there and got a whiff of what it smelled like, and he cussed a little bit and said, "Jason, did you do that?" I said, "Yes, sir, Coach." He goes, "Y'all come over here. We ain't gonna stand in all that."
That's good stuff, man.
Deke sold me out on that, man.
He did. He threw you under the bus, no doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, man, we appreciate you joining the show, taking the time. Look forward to seeing you here on campus when we get football cranked up. Good luck to your boy, your daughter, everybody else. And we really appreciate it, my man.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. I appreciate it. We're coming up today, actually, to help Jonathan move out of the hotel into the dorm. So I hope to see you more, and I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Take care, Jason. That's Jason Odom. Join us on the Tight Narrow Hotline. Hey, folks, this day in sports is brought to you by the Best Restoration. Do you have COVID-19 concerns? Do what everyone is doing and hire the Best Restoration to fully sanitize and sterilize your home or office. Visit their offices this week for a free bottle of hand sanitizer when you mention the code SHANE. Call 352-234-8994. This day in sports, in 1981, Pete Rose ties Stan Musial's nationally record of 3,630 hits. So want to thank, that's pretty much, man, the hour went by fast today. I want to thank Heath Cline joining us, obviously Jason Odom. Don't forget tomorrow we have former Gator quarterback Wayne Peace and Brent Beard. Jackie Spreads will be back next week with some great interviews. He's brought to you by Peachland Dentistry, Gator Nation's #1 choice of dentistry in Port Charlotte and surrounding areas. On Friday, we're going to have Chris DeMarco and Larry Vitale joining the program. Let's see, what else? Man, I tell you, the time went by extremely fast. But that's going to be a wrap for today's show. Refresh your vehicle and your brand with a vehicle wrap from WrapSpot. June is your lucky month at WrapSpot. Mention promo code Shane and receive 13% off your vehicle wrap. Visit them at wrappedspot.com today. Hey, folks, hope you enjoyed the show. Tune in tomorrow. Go like us, follow us, all that good stuff. Take care.